Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance is more worried about appeasing the credit rating agencies and the capital markets than providing relief for the suffering people of Jamaica. We can always recover lost ground in our effort to lower debt when the crisis has passed. The plan is to reduce the public debt as rapidly as possible to 60% of GDP by March 2028. Madam Speaker, it was the PNP administration of Portia Simpson Miller, the most honourable, that began the process of reducing the debt. In fact, our administration did the heavy lifting to get the debt down. We are fully committed to achieving that target of 60% of GDP. We are fully committed to fiscal prudence, and our track record proves it. The last PNP administration reduced public debt from 147% of GDP to 115% of GDP in just 4 years. We strengthened the fiscal responsibility framework with laws that make the budget and the whole fiscal program of the government much more transparent. Perhaps most importantly, Madam Speaker, we passed legislation and implemented administrative changes to overhaul the country's tax collection system. The JLP government has reaped the fruits of those transformational reforms since 2016. Tax revenues have increased rapidly over this period, outstripping inflation and nominal GDP growth, and without the need for any net new taxes in the period. Dr. Peter Phillips, as Finance Minister, was Gleaner Man of the Year in 2015 for these monumental achievements. I am honoured to have worked closely with him to deliver the legislative reforms that have put Jamaica on a sound fiscal path for the future. And I say, hail the man. But as the most honourable Portia Simpson Miller often says, a responsible government must balance the books while balancing people's lives. The public debt is now below 100% of GDP. Below. And GDP is recovering from the effects of the pandemic. We believe that Jamaica can afford to slow the pace of debt reduction at this time and use those resources to help the people get through these most difficult times. On the other hand, the negative social impact of continued excessive fiscal conservatism when we're in a crisis will do lasting damage to the society. I would support additional expenditures of up to 2% of GDP to address the critical needs facing the society. That's about $40 billion. It is time to focus on helping our people. It is not the time for excessive fiscal conservatism. The government is playing with fire by leaving vulnerable populations unprotected in this vortex of high inflation and the unbearable cost of living. Madam Speaker, one thing I love about the Jamaican people is their ability to identify a puppy show.
But you know the real irony of the situation, Madam Speaker? You know the real irony? These are fiscal rules that the opposition leader and myself, among several other senators at the time, helped to put in place. I was appointed to the Senate by then opposition leader Andrew Holness. And in opposition, I supported the then government's introduction of the amendments to the Fiscal and Audit Administration Act that strengthened Jamaica's fiscal rules. Mark Golding piloted those amendments in the Senate, and I supported him. So as Minister of Finance, I am abiding by the laws that he and I helped to put in place, and he seeks to label me for doing that. Now that's what you call an irony, but some people would even call it hypocrisy. You really think that Jamaican people can't reason, don't you? And Madam Speaker, we have the courage to be faithfully doing this without having the IMF watching over our shoulders, or without having the IMF to blame, or without having the IMF to use as cover. Madam Speaker, the opposition leader cannot, on one hand, claim the high ground of having helped to strengthen Jamaica's fiscal rules. Right? The fiscal rules were first implemented in 2010, by the way, when Audley Shaw was minister. But he can't claim the high ground of strengthening the fiscal rules. And then another, make a proposal, slow the pace of debt reduction, whatever you called it, that if applied would imply an abandonment of them. Choose what you want. You can't occupy both positions. It is to the credit of former Prime Minister Portia Simpson-Miller and former Minister Peter Phillips, who greatly strengthened the fiscal rules, first introduced by Prime Minister Bruce Golding and former Minister Audley Shaw. On behalf of Jamaican people, I beg you, let's not undo their collective legacy. Too many people work too hard and sacrifice too much for that. And their legacy only exists if we maintain the path and we create our own legacy by building on it, strengthening it, protecting it, Madam Speaker, not destroying it. You know, I once told Peter Phillips privately in this chamber, sidebar conversation, that his legacy on these matters, no, I'm saying what I said, I won't say what he said, what I said. I said to him, his legacy on these matters is safe with us. But based on the irresponsibility of some of the utterances from Mr. Golding, I'm not so sure we can conclude that his legacy is safe with him. Mikhail, tell him, his legacy is not safe with him.
I can imagine Lisa taking that slogan.
Madam Speaker, let's just remember a few things, man. And I'm really appealing to all members of the House, opposition, right? Madam Speaker, though we manage our debt ratios efficiently during the pandemic, Jamaica is still the 9th highest indebted country in the hemisphere. 9th highest out of 34. The average debt ratio in Latin America and the Caribbean, Madam Speaker, is 72%. We celebrate coming out to 95 because we've always been so high. But we don't realize how risky it is. And what it does is it makes us highly vulnerable. The problem with high debt, Madam Speaker, is that it intensifies the structural vulnerability of small size and an open economy and susceptibility to tropical cyclones. Those are structural vulnerabilities, Madam Speaker. They leave us susceptible to economic shocks that are exacerbated by high debt. And while those structural vulnerabilities, I call them structural because they can't easily change. We can't move where we are located geographically. We can, over a long period of time, address the openness. Hard to address the small size. That will take, you have to, you know. You sound like you have experience, but so, Madam Speaker,